What's going on, everyone? Gavin Willie here, Miami Movement, Performance and Therapeutics. So today we're gonna go over the hamstrings real quick. So to be honest, I'm not sure why I wrote this when I could just kind of have text on screen, but since I wrote it, let's kind of go through it. So hamstrings, this is a group of 4 muscles. We have the membranosus, the semimembranosus, the semitendinosus, and the biceps femoris. Now the biceps femoris, just like the bicep on your arm, has 2 heads. You have a short head and a long head. They both do the same thing. One is just bigger. Both the semimembranosus, the semitendinosus do the same actions. They both do hip extension. They both stabilize the pelvis. They both do knee flexion as well, and they internally rotate the knee. I'll show you that in a bit. Whereas the biceps femoris, again, just like the one on the arm, just flexes at the joint, knee flexion. Also does some external rotation of the knee joint. I'll show you that as well. As I mentioned, we're gonna go over the functions of the hamstrings. So we look at the biceps femoris. Knee flexion is the major function. Then, like I said, we have external rotation. If we look at the biceps, it's almost like, yeah, we have the flexion at the elbow joint, but it also supinates. So here, yes, it works it, but also boom. And what's happening right in here, this little muscle right in there is working. I've seen some strong people struggle with this little movement because they have a tendency to want to externally rotate that whole leg at the femur. Now with the semitendinosus and the semimembranosus, it does the opposite, internal rotation. And you see how that shin is going out and in is because it's those muscles that have control over this function. So it's a neat thing to play around with to get a little bit more control over your hamstrings. Again, external rotation, biceps femoris, internal rotation, the semi muscles. So the reason for this video is because I want you to understand how the hamstrings function. So if you know how they function, you can then translate that to your workouts when you do hamstring exercises. To be honest with you, I don't necessarily pick and choose exercises based on the exercises themselves, but more what's the function of that exercise. People tend to load up on exercises that do knee flexion, so some sort of leg curl. Leg curls are good. To me, they're really important for protecting the knee, and especially at that range of motion. However, we want to incorporate some sort of hip extension in that. So if I'm looking to work hip extension, I'm going to look at exercises that emphasize hip extension. Now the issue is most people do these exercises wrong. So whether we're looking at an RDL, whether dumbbell or barbell, stiff leg deadlift, even a good morning, all these things, they tend to do them incorrectly. So their hamstrings don't activate, or they gone too heavy to the point where their hamstrings just aren't gonna be that active. Now other muscles are working. Now it feels like the lower back is tightening up. Might sound familiar. If we look at this from the standpoint of it's just too heavy, lighten the weight, move slower, give your body time to get acclimated to the movement so that the hamstrings can feel it. Now, the hip extension is really important. Because we're working those 2 muscles, those 2 semi-long ass words, they're gonna be the inner hamstring. So how do we get these muscles in here to work more? And how do we limit the activation of the glutes? Well, I like to go toes forward, or even maybe slightly inward to really target the inside here. But let's go feet forward. So now when we hinge back, I want you to move slow. Where's the weight in our feet? Well, I tend to go not all the way into my heels, but a little bit more towards the heels. So I still want to maintain contact with my toes in the floor, but a majority of the weight is now shifting towards the back. But again, not all the way back there. So back, back, back. And you should feel the stretch right underneath the glute. Not on the glute, but underneath it. For you bodybuilders, that glute ham tie-in, we're working the upper part of the hamstring. So, if we're doing a stiff leg deadlift, again, stiff leg, I don't like to lock out my knees, but I do like to have a slight bend in them. So if we're going stiff leg, boom. And again, knees are forward. So you might notice that a bunch of you, because I see this a lot too when I make these corrections for people, that the lower they go, they're shaking in here because now their hamstrings are working that much more and they're not used to it. I like to just say they're weak. So that's stiff leg. RDLs, the only difference is now there's gonna be a slight bend in the knee. To me, you're gonna feel more of a contraction in the upper part of the hamstring with this movement. And again, we're preventing those knees from shooting out. We're going straight, boom, boom, boom. So right when I bend, I allow that bend, I feel this right up here. Stiff leg, yes, I feel the whole hamstring, however, it tends to be more concentrated around the knee. Again, let's go back to good mornings. I'm gonna go very straight, narrow. Now, if you struggle to reinforce that, so what you can do is give your body some feedback to kind of help you along. I like to incorporate bands. So I'm gonna put something on the inside. So if you're trying to do both sides, you might need another band on another rack, but let's just say you have an issue on one side in particular. I like to go, boom. So now I'm resisting this being pulled out. And because I'm feeling here, I'm getting more activation from the hamstring. Also some of the adductors. Now, believe it or not, you have some of the muscles of the adductor group that also do hip extension. So it's really important to hit them as well. Again, we can go feet totally straight, or we can kind of come in slightly, because even here, I kind of feel this up in here. Of course, you're gonna load to what you can, not what you think you want to. The function of the glutes is hip extension and external rotation. If we're externally rotated and we're doing RDLs, those glutes are working. If your goals are to work the glutes, that's an excellent variation to do. You see how my knees point out a little bit? It's not necessarily about my feet, more so the angle of my femurs. You see rotating, my glutes are turning on. Strength athletes are gonna mimic their movement, so maybe they might mimic the deadlift. So that, again, their foot position, or a good morning, they're gonna mimic either the squat or deadlift position. And for everyone else, sometimes the weight tends to be a little bit too far out in front of you. That's pulling you forward, and this becomes your base of support. So now you're overworking that area. So either you're gonna develop a strong lower back, or you're gonna injure your lower back, one of the two. So I hope this video helps. Feel free to message me for anything else. I'm Gavin Willie, Miami Movement, Performance and Therapeutics.